Disclaimer: title is for the algorithm and is not meant to be authoritative. It's exceedingly rare for a filmmaker to make a great film. It's even rarer for them to repeat that, and rarer still to manage 3 or more in a row. Directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Stanley Kubrick, Tarkovsky, Scorsese, they and others all have great claims for best 3-film run. Today, I want to highlight the work of Mikhail Kalatozashvili, who, especially with the distinctive visual collaboration of Sergei Udasevsky, created a remarkable run from 1957 to 1964 with The Cranes Are Flying, Letter Never Sent, and I Am Cuba. So let's highlight all 3 and talk about what makes them special. This, I think, is probably one of the best movies I've ever seen. It combines punchy, raw, emotional human impact with some absolutely brilliant technical work. It's a personal contender for some of the best cinematography I've ever seen in a film. I will probably go the longest on this because I think some of the main strengths will carry over to the other 2. The Cranes Are Flying is about an engaged couple who are split up as enlistment starts for World War II in Russia. Veronica moves in with her fiancé's family and waits for him to come home. First point is going to be on blocking, which is essentially how characters are placed and moved within a scene, if you're not familiar. I've heard it espoused that blocking is something of a dying art in modern cinema. There may be something to that depending on some things, but I think mostly that generally the filming style of older eras lends itself more to blocking having more prominence and more storytelling or functional significance. When you've got longer average shot lengths like things used to be, you've got more time for developing movement within a shot and within a series of shots. When your conversations are more in masters and twos, like the style used to be, instead of more singles with shot reverse shot, then you've got more potential for interactions between characters with movement. Now let's couple that with a rough definition of the cinematographic style in the film, because the camera and the actors are going to be heavy collaborators. And cameras have blocking too, especially in these 3 movies. Cranes utilizes a pretty significant field of view with a wide-angle lens, and it uses this lens choice to perfection. That field of view creates a drastic difference in the foreground and the background, so character placement in terms of depth feels especially weighty. The film loves to press that advantage using the extreme presence of faces in close-up, as well as creating in-scene contrast between levels of depth in the frame. So here's an example of both the camera and actor blocking working together. We start out in these tight quarters on the bus. He's playing with depth as she goes the wrong way at first. Compositional interest from passing figures in the foreground. Dynamic changes in her depth in the frame. And then the big change in depth as the camera rises, reducing her to an insignificant speck compared to the tanks, which are driving in the foreground, getting larger in contrast. The way she moves is excellent because she's getting lost in crowds, lost in tanks, running the wrong way with uncertainty, etc. And the camera is great for capturing her intensity up close, creating compositional interest by not following her uniformly, and moving to emphasize her isolation. Here's another example, again using foreground and background differences to create compositional interest. We get glimpses of Boris as he searches, but mostly we get varying depth of bystanders as he looks on in the background. Because of the intensity of the foreground, these faces carry such weight as they say goodbyes, wrap up business matters, or just sorrowfully sing as they remind the audience that it's not just Boris and Veronica experiencing this. One more very simple but to me very powerful example is right here. They've got the lighting set up for a dramatic shot on Veronica, and all we need is some motivated movement to get into the right visual beat. It's the significant move into the foreground to a more personal and mirrored version of the blocking just a few seconds ago when Veronica finds out that Boris volunteered. It's very simple, but it's a way to use movement to transition between shots instead of cutting. I haven't even touched on the 2 most incredible visual scenes in the film because they'd probably be too much of a spoiler for this brief discussion, but there's so much incredible staging and artistry here. And the best part is that it's all in service of a bitter, deeply human story that certainly made me cry a couple times. And that's the dream, isn't it? To be wowed, to be emotionally moved by a film. Like that's art is emotion. It's what we want. And I think all the artistry on display here goes to serve that purpose beautifully. 4 geologists search for diamonds in Serbia until a forest fire traps them in the woods. There's some absolutely insane work in this movie, and you can take Sean Baker's word for it if not mine. Even when things are calm and just getting started, you can see signature play with foreground and background in places like these. Here we get some close-up intensity with emphatic camera movement to magnify conflict. We have fun symbolic editing and composition, good use of silhouettes, which is something the film does well in multiple spots, and in the meantime the film weaves a human tale of man versus nature and the drive for accomplishment to conquer something in a short lifetime. Fortunately, the whole forest fire thing is not a spoiler because this is where the film gets bonkers in its execution. You hope they didn't burn down an actual forest for the sake of the film, but I suppose it's hard to be sure. They did a lot of crazy things before there were more safety regulations and stuff. But things like this are absolutely wild. These guys aren't running around with like Alexa minis either. This is cardio on top of cardio running around with all this camera equipment. And then how do you even compose moments like these? Like, do you just start a controlled fire and hope for the best? Maybe just dampen things as best as you can? You kind of figure that with this much fire, even dampening won't last that long. Probably try to rehearse and get a general idea of what happens, but I just can't imagine how you go about planning this. The fact that some of these sequences turn out so compelling with such good visual results is amazing to me. I mean, how much footage was cut? Did they actually get everything they planned for? Maybe it's just pure improvisational skill, both from actors and camera operators, who knows? The fact is that there is essentially no behind the scenes footage or documentation for this movie. And this makes it a little bit magical to me. And I appreciate some kind of beauty in that. It's great to know how things work. And, you can get a lot of education from looking at behind the scenes stuff and hearing directors, actors, crew people talk about the process and learning. But mysteries to puzzle over can be somewhat rare, especially nowadays when behind the scenes stuff is common. And I appreciate that this is just a fascinating puzzle that we never get to know the answer to. But we still get to see the magic of what was put on screen regardless of if we know how it happened or not. And I think that's kind of a beautiful thing. This is a series of 4 vignettes about pre-revolution Cuba, each giving insight into the character of Cuba as a people and a nation. Of the 3, this is the most energetic and emphatic. Given the subject matter, it's absolutely fitting. Some of the film is dedicated to a contrast between the tourist trap of Cuba and the suffering poorer Cubans. Some speaks to the simmering anger around the suppression of revolutionary sentiments. And ultimately, it's a build-up for the Cuban cause for revolution, as a collaboration between Russia and Cuba, who were relatively new allies at the time. So the film wants to highlight reasons for revolution while also celebrating the Cuban identity. And the energy is fitting to bring that Cuban identity to life. It's also fitting as a call to action, or depicting the calls to revolutionary action within the film. Camera movement stuck out in letters, and it does here too, though maybe slightly differently. There is less outright sprinting and danger here, though definitely not zero of either. Here the calling card is simply a constant kineticism. A camera that's always creating interest in the frame with angles or motion. Sometimes the motion is working in concert with actions on screen, like in this showcase of chaos at the drive-in. Sometimes it's becoming an entity of its own, like in this frenzy at the sugarcane field. My favorite sequence of movement is in the Gentleman's Club in the first vignette. The striking lighting with the energetic blocking and the constant movement, such a fantastic effect. I think it's electrifying. Each of the segments have their pluses visually. My favorite single segment is the sugarcane one. For some Googling, they used infrared film stock for the sugarcane vignette as well as the introductory title sequence. And the effect is I think striking. It's amazing to see how the sky goes from a very clear, calming white to dark and ominous when they need it to, just based on where the camera's pointing and based on the light. And the sugarcane becomes a blinding white, and there's such a stark contrast in the darks and lights that you don't normally get with regular film stock, and I think it's a great effect. And of course, I'm focusing on the visual efforts for all of these, but I mean, there's great work across the board. The general blocking, sound work, atmosphere, it's also strong and compelling. I think one of the best moments of I Am Cuba is sound related, where we have a scene with a sniper on the roof, and we get the effect of like this diegetic music that pops in occasionally. And it's to the effect of, breaking his concentration. When he's locked in, there's no music, but occasionally it'll break in as he kind of like snaps out of what he was doing, what he was thinking about doing. Such a singular vision and such singular execution. I think sometimes modern viewers will accuse older movies of being boring or not as interesting or not being able to do as much as movies can do now. And it is certainly true that there are some tools in the modern filmmaker's toolkit that they just didn't have back then. But there are movies like I Am Cuba, but there are movies like the 3 of these that have a singular vision that you don't really even see today. There are movies like these that have this type of energy that is extremely hard to replicate, like even with a fast edited movie like a Wreck or How to Blow Up a Pipeline or something. Like these movies are creating energy. This has always been possible, and filmmakers have always been smart. There's always been great stuff, even 60 plus years ago. And I think it's awesome that movies like these, like Cuba and Cranes specifically, 33 and 32 respectively on Letterboxd's top 500. That's a big indicator among younger modern movie-going audiences that people respect the classics, and there is a good reason that movies like these, with their incredible execution, are so high on a list like that. This is an incredible achievement to put this level of vision and detail on screen for 3 consecutive films, and I think it's up there with the great 3 film runs in cinema history.